first YouTube video, so let me first start by introducing myself. I am Katie, and I have two children, Sarah Kate, who's 22 months old, and Hunter, who is 5.5 weeks old, almost 6 weeks. He'll be 6 weeks on Sunday. The purpose of this video is to tell you guys about my birth story. It was an all-natural birth, and it was amazing. So we'll start from the beginning. So my due date was October 10th, 2016, and I started having contractions and labor pains probably about a week before my due date. Really 2 weeks before my due date. I had my membrane stripped at my 38-week appointment. Yeah. And started feeling contractions about 2 days afterwards. I was pretty sure I was going into labor 2 days after my 38-week appointment, which happened to be like 38 weeks and 2 days. Sorry, I thought I heard the baby crying. And never went into labor. Continued to have labor contractions off and on for the next 2 weeks. Some days were more extreme than others. I had lost my mucus plug, bloody show, the whole 9 yards. So I kept thinking I was going into labor and never went into labor. Let me preface this whole story by saying when I was about 10 weeks pregnant, I heard about this book called Supernatural Childbirth by Jackie Mize. I have it downloaded on my Kindle, on my iPad. I heard about it through Mama Natural, or Natural Mama? Mama Natural, I think, Mama Natural. And she had recommended reading it. It is a faith-based book about childbirth. It's a really great book. I highly recommend it if you're pregnant or wanting to get pregnant, or any, if you're just a young woman looking to have a baby, or anybody really. I recommend it. It is amazing. It pretty much walks you through the gospel and tells you the truth about childbirth. We all have been raised and groomed to think of childbirth as being a painful, horrible, terrifying experience. But supernatural childbirth kind of reveals the truth in the Word. That is, that Jesus came to save us all. And through that saving, one of the pieces of that is that women don't have to experience pain in childbirth. So it's really a phenomenal book, and it's not just about not experiencing pain in childbirth, but it's also about not feeling sick in the first trimester or second trimester or third trimester, whatever trimester is your poison. Usually it's the first for most women. You don't have to feel that sickness, the discomfort. You don't have to feel, you just have to trust in the Word and align your thoughts and actions with what's written in the Bible. So I really tried to adhere to all the truth that is in the Bible throughout this pregnancy. Don't get me wrong, I felt sick sometimes. I had pain a lot of times. But I really felt in my spirit that my childbirth was going to be completely different from my first. With my first, I was in labor. My water broke at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I was in labor for a full 24 hours, or about 22 hours, because I had her at 5:15 the next morning. Now, with that being said, my water broke. I didn't really start having contractions till about 2 in the afternoon. So if you count from when I started having contractions, I was having a painful labor for about 14 hours. I think that's the right math. But yeah, so I just knew that this delivery labor, the whole experience was going to be a lot different from my first. And I prayed about it often. I wanted it to be different. I trusted in God that it was going to be different. And so fast forward, 30-ish weeks, and it was Sunday, October 9th. I woke up, and I had the day before on Saturday, the 8th, I had really bad contractions-ish that were 30 minutes apart, nothing regular. But I did have an increased bloody show. It was red, and so I Googled and was a little worried about the red discharge. Although I knew it was fine, I just wanted to call and check. And of course, the nurse I spoke to went ahead and said, go to the hospital, because you could either be in labor or, further progress and you realize you are and you need to get there, or it could be something else. So we just want to get it checked out. So I went into labor and delivery. They checked me. I was at a 3 centimeters. I was like 60%, 70% effaced, which is what I was when I went into the doctor for my 38-week appointment. So I was really bummed that I hadn't progressed in like 2 weeks. And I had been having contractions. So I was like, why haven't I progressed? Really, in my cervix was anterior, whichever the one means, is the position that your cervix is in when you're not in active labor. I think it's anterior. So I was just really bummed. I was like, okay, never gonna have a baby. I'm gonna be pregnant for the rest of my life. And they sent me home, and that was that. Everything was fine. They said it could have just been your bloody show. They kind of were like, you shouldn't have come in. But the nurse told me to come in. I went in. So that night, I had a really good night's sleep for being 39 weeks and 6 days pregnant, five days pregnant. Woke up at about 8. My mother-in-law was in town. She came to stay with us and waited here with us until we went into labor, because we live in Colorado. We're from South Carolina, so we had no family here. All of our friends have babies, so it's kind of an inconvenience to have them on hold or on call waiting for us to go into labor so we could have a place to put our 2-year-old. So we had her come out and stay with us. So the whole time I had been, like I said, contracting from 38 weeks on forward, and every time I would say anything about it to anybody, it would go away and nothing would happen. And then people would be like, staring at me, are you about to go into labor? What's going on? So it was really stressful. So I finally decided I'm not going to say anything. If I start feeling contractions, mum's the word. So I woke up, like I said, 8 o'clock. Sorry, I keep repeating myself. And started having contractions about 9:30 in the morning. And they were, not too painful, wasn't too crazy. It was somewhat consistent. I wasn't really timing it at first, but they were happening like every 20 to 30 minutes. Sometimes it would be longer in between contractions, sometimes it would be shorter. Wasn't too excited because this had happened before. Nothing happened, and I had just been at labor and delivery, and I was only 3 centimeters. I hadn't progressed in the last 2 weeks. My cervix was whatever, anterior, posterior, whichever the bad one is, where you're not in active labor. And so I wasn't too excited. We ended up running some errands that day. Mother-in-law went to go get a facial, so we went and dropped her off to do that. We went to Target to get Sarah, my oldest, a gift from baby brother. By the way, I was expecting a boy. And just last minute things. What else did we do? Oh, when mother-in-law was getting her facial, my husband and I went, and he got his hair cut. We went and had lunch. I would like to say it was a nice, relaxing day. I was a little on edge for a number of reasons. One of them being I was ready to have the baby. I was a little bummed out about the night before, and I was having contractions, and I'm like, what is this? Is this going to amount to something or nothing? So it wasn't that relaxing of a day. I was kind of being rude to my husband and just a little on edge in general. And but if I had had a better attitude, it would have been a very nice, relaxing day. Running errands, having lunch. We were hanging out downtown in our favorite little downtown area. Having contractions, like I said. As the day progressed, it kind of got, instead of it being 20 to 30 minutes apart, they were more like 15 minutes apart. There was a period like between 11 and 12 where in the afternoon, like lunchtime, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., was the contractions completely stopped. So that's kind of when I started getting really annoyed. But they did come back after lunch. We went and picked up my mother-in-law from her facial or massage. I don't know why I'm calling it a facial. It was a massage. Brought her. We all came back to the house. She went and took a nap. My oldest Sarah went and lay down to take a nap, and my husband and I just sat on the couch and watched football. The Carolina Gamecocks, University of South Carolina game was on. I don't remember who they were playing, but it was really nice and relaxing. I finally kind of calmed down. Was able to hash things out with my husband, you know, just get all that negative feeling that you're feeling inside on the outside, talking to him, feeling better. And just relaxed. And it helped that my contractions had gone from about 15 minutes apart to about 7 minutes apart, 7 to 9. And I, you know, wasn't really talking about it too much. He knew what was going on because I keep him in the loop, but everybody else, no one knew what was going on. No one knew I was having contractions. Sorry, thirsty. So, I don't know, like halfway through the game, like I said, I wasn't really paying attention. They got to be like more like 5 to 7 minutes apart instead of 7 to 9. I was like, I don't want these to go away. So I got up and went on a walk around the neighborhood by myself, which was nice. When I go on walks, for some reason, they kind of like elongated the time between contractions, because at this point I was timing them. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to stop walking. So I came home, went to the bathroom. I had some clary sage essential oil, which, by the way, do not use that unless you're 40 plus weeks pregnant. It can induce labor even in your first trimester. It could lead to miscarriages. Not recommended until you're 40 plus weeks. Rubbed it on my stomach, just a little bit, like a little drop on my stomach. I said a prayer. I said, Lord, let this be the day, if it's your will. Let's get this show on the road. And at that point, I knew in my head that it was probably going to be today. And I don't know why it makes me emotional. Probably because I'm exhausted and hormonal still. But I went back out, sat on the couch. They were like consistently 5 minutes apart at this point, like sometimes 4 to 5 minutes. So I was like, well, I'm going to go finish packing my bag. I need to make the bed. Let's get Sarah's dinner ready, so if something happens, we can go. And by this point, it was probably like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Contractions still weren't really painful. They were just contractions. But again, I knew that they weren't going to be painful, so I think that helped them not be painful. You just have to look at them like, you can't restrict your body, like brace for them to come, because it's kind of working against what the contraction's doing. The contraction's there to kind of help spread things and open your body up so you can birth a child. And if you're fearful of them, that's the worst thing. It makes the contractions 100% more painful. You get fearful, you automatically tense up, and you're fighting against the contraction, which makes it painful. So I just was really relaxed, and really every time I'd have one, I just would know that it was doing its job. It was opening me up. And it really just felt like, and this is in the book, like if you contract your arm muscle and you hold it, it doesn't hurt. It's not painful. Sure, after you hold it like this for a little while, your arm starts to shake a little bit and all that, but it doesn't hurt. So that's just kind of how I thought about the contractions in my stomach, the same thing. And so they weren't really painful. I knew that they were doing their job. I was excited. I was ready to have the baby. So anyways, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, start making the bed, straightening up the house. David starts getting Sarah's dinner ready, my daughter. And while I'm making up the bed, it's like 4:45, they're like a minute and a half apart. And I'm like, well, maybe that was just a fluke, contraction. And so I timed the next 3 to 4, and they're a minute and a half apart, and they're lasting about a minute. So I go in, I'm like, okay, it's time to go. Let's pack the car and go. And my mother-in-law's like, what's happening? And I'm like, hey, I've been contracting all day. They're a minute and a half apart. We got to go. Thankfully, David had just started feeding Sarah, so she had dinner, and we left everything in my mother-in-law's hands and left. Went to the hospital. We're like 25 minutes away. Florida baby. Got to the hospital about 6, so we probably left here about 5:30, which makes sense. Sorry, my timeline's a little off. Anyways, got to the hospital 6 o'clock, maybe like 5:45. Had a couple of contractions on the way there, obviously, because they're a minute and a half apart. I had more than a couple, and then, you know, walking into the hospital, I was having contractions. I was terrified that I was going to get there and they were going to check me and be like, sorry, you're 3 centimeters, go back home. But finally got to like triage and labor and delivery, and we were brought back to the room that we were in triage when I went into labor with Sarah. So it was like the same room. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a good sign. And stupid, I know, but the nurse came in, she checked me, and she's like, you're 7 centimeters. I was like, hallelujah. I was so excited. But then I was immediately fearful. I was like, oh God, that means that it's do or die. Like, I'm 7 centimeters. If I'm gonna get an epidural, I need to get one. And if I'm not, I'm not. And that means I'm gonna do a natural childbirth. And I started to get real fearful, right? Which is the worst thing you can do. So I had David pray, you know, keep me calm. He prayed for me. I pulled out the Supernatural Childbirth book on my phone, and they have like really amazing prayers at some point in the book. I don't know if it's the middle or the end of the book, but they have really good prayers that you can pray while you're in labor. And I was praying those, and they were working, and I finally started to calm down. Now, don't get me wrong, there was periods over the next few hours where I would get a little panicky again, and I'd have to reel it back in and pray. And every time I'd pray, really relaxed. And at one point, I just felt the Holy Spirit in the delivery room with us. Like, I just knew he was there, and I knew everything was going to be okay. We were listening to praise music. It was just really relaxed. The nurses didn't think I was in labor. They were like, they kept coming. Every time I'd have a contraction, they'd feel my stomach, because I guess the harder your stomach is, the more intense the contraction is. And they just really didn't think I was having very active contractions, or that I was in any sort of active labor. They just didn't believe it. And every time they're like, okay, that's a pretty intense contraction. And they were kind of making fun of me. They're like, you're just over there looking at your phone, and when you have a contraction, you just focus, and you're back on your phone. Like, what are you doing? And of course, I was reading those prayers and just, you know, staying focused in the moment with the Lord, with my husband. Just really like, okay, this is about to happen. I'm about to do this. At one point, the doctor who was on call, because my insurance, I don't have a set doctor who's going to deliver me. I have, whoever's on call is the person who's going to deliver me. And the doctor who was on call came in and was like, okay, so I hear you're going to try and do this naturally. Can you tell me why? And I'm like, okay. I'm like, you know, 7+ centimeters dilated in active labor, and you want me to explain to you why I'm not doing it? Like, I was like, this is my choice. And she's like, well, are you sure? She started like making me question my decision, because she's a doctor and who am I? I don't know anything. And then thankfully my husband came up, or he was there for the whole conversation, and he just started speaking. He's like, this is why we're not doing it, and explained why we weren't doing it compared to last time, which, I mean, there was really no issue with the epidural last time. It was just as soon as I got it, labor slowed down completely. It took an extra couple of hours to have the baby, you know, things like that. And stuck up for me and said, we're not doing this, and this is why, and thank you anyways. And so thank goodness he was there, because I was, even though I was in the moment and present and knew I could do this, I was tinkering on the edge of just being like, forget it, give me the epidural. So I really had to be focused, you know, the whole time. And when people come in, like doctors, and say, are you sure? Is this the best idea? Because it's going to hurt. I'm going to be like, oh, maybe she's right. But thankfully my husband was there, and he was like, back off. This is what's happening, and this is what we're doing. He was the best doula ever. And so after that, you know, I'm there from, and when we got in there, David's like, listen, we're going to have this baby by 9 o'clock. And it was 6 o'clock. I'm like, you're crazy. It's not going to be that quick. And he's like, no, I promise you, we are. And I was like, okay. And when we got into the actual labor and delivery room, the nurses came, and they're like, can we go ahead? I know you want to do this naturally, but can we put an IV in just in case? I'm like, yeah, that's fine. So they were trying to put the IV in, and I guess the nurse who was doing it, I don't know if she was just like nervous or if it was her first time, but she blew my vein. Okay, it really hurt. I was like bleeding everywhere. She kept sticking it in there and trying to make it work and moving it around and restuck it, and it eventually blew my vein, and I started gushing blood. Finally, and David looked at me. He was like, "This is going to be the worst part." And I was like, "I hope you're right." But then they brought a nurse in who was a good IV person, and she came and put a good one in on this side. You know, after the IV was in, there was just this period from 6 to 8 where, like I said, we were listening to praise music. We were just really relaxed. You know, I found the most comfortable position for me was sitting on the labor and delivery bed, kind of leaned back with my legs in like a butterfly position, and just kind of letting it happen. Kind of having conversation with David in between. I think he was watching a football game. It was just relaxing. I was like, this is not bad. And it was almost to the point where I was like, what's going on? Why isn't this bad? So at 8 o'clock, they came back in to check me because they're like, we're going to let you labor for 2 hours, and if nothing significant happens, then we'll come check you, assuming you haven't had the baby. And so they came in and they checked me. I was expecting to say, okay, 9 centimeters is 100% effaced. You're ready to do this. You got a centimeter to go. And they were like, you're still 7 centimeters. And I guess I was 100% effaced. I don't know what my effacement was. But when they said I was 7 centimeters, like I hadn't progressed at all from when I came in to 2 hours later. I was like, no, this can't happen. And it was 8 o'clock. I looked at David. I was like, I guess we're not going to have the baby by 9. He's like, oh, we're going to have the baby by 9. I was like, whatever. And the nurses were like, well, no big deal. You know, how about you get up and walk around and, you know, let's just see if that helps. So I was like, okay. So we got up. We walked around the hall. And the walking area in the hall at the hospital that I'm at is like really small. I remember it from when I was pregnant with Sarah. It's like you could do like 5 loops in like a minute. But we did like 1 loop pretty slowly because, you know, I've got all this pressure and I'm having contractions. And so we did 1 loop and I was like, all right, I gotta go to the bathroom. So and again, the whole time I'm having these contractions at 7 centimeters and it's just not that painful. I know it sounds crazy, but it's just not. Like I had this trust in the Lord, and I knew that my body was doing what it was meant to do and that He didn't intend for it to be painful. And it wasn't. It was just, like I said, a muscle contraction. So I had to go to the bathroom. I had to pee. So I came back into our room, sat on the toilet, and keep in mind, okay, that when the doctor came in to kind of say, hey, are you sure you don't want that epidural? She said, once your water breaks, it's going to hurt bad. Okay, so anyways, fast forward. Peeing, and all of a sudden he goes pop and gush. So I was like, okay, my water just broke. And the nurses had told me before, they're like, once your water breaks, let us know immediately. So David went outside and he said, hey, you know, I can't remember our nurse's name. Amy, maybe? Katie's water just broke. And so she came in, rushed in, which kind of scared me a little bit. I was like, why is she rushing in? My water just broke. No big deal. And she like checked the toilet to see. And then when I stood up, she saw it gush down my leg. And she's like, okay, yeah, your water did break. I was like, yeah, no, I know. I've done this before. But then in that moment, because both the nurses and the doctor had said once your water breaks, it's going to progress really quickly. Also, when they checked me when I was 8 centimeters, or 7 centimeters, the second time they checked me, they're like, we could break your water, but we think it'd be better if it just naturally progressed, because once we break your water, it's going to move, things are going to move really fast, and it's going to be really painful. So they said it like 4 or 5 times throughout like the 2 hours that we were there. And so once my water broke, I was like, oh God, it's going to be really painful. And I freaked. I lost it. Because like I said, I was on that edge. Like if I stayed focused and I was in the moment, I was fine. But I could just fall right over the edge and freak out. And so that's what happened. As soon as my water broke, I freaked out. And the nurse is like, you need to go into the, because I was in the bathroom, she was like, go into the room and get on the bed. And I'm like trying to walk. I'm like, I can't walk. It hurts so bad because the pressure. And I mean, things really did progress. I guess I went from like a 7 to a 10 in like that second. And she's like, no, focus. You need to sit down on the bed and get in position. I was like, I can't sit down, the pain. And she's like, sit down. I was like, I can't do this. And then I looked to my husband. I was like, you need to pray for me because I'm losing it. And so he said this really great prayer in front of everybody, and it helped. But I think I had fallen so far off the edge. I and things were happening so quickly that I couldn't really bring myself back to that point of focus. Finally, the doctor, who I wasn't very fond of because she was questioning my epidural situation, looked at me and said, listen, we got like 3 pushes here and the baby's gonna be out. You're fine, just focus. She is the one, believe it or not, that brought me back to where I needed to be. I was like, okay. It did hurt. But not as bad as I expected it to hurt without an epidural. And I think that if I had stayed present and focused throughout the whole thing, it wouldn't have hurt. But it hurt. I could feel him. He was right down there. When they say that when you're birthing out a child naturally, and they say that you hear these like real guttural, instinctual like yells that a woman gives off when she's giving birth, that was happening. Like, it was crazy sounding. I'm sure I was like terrifying other women listening to what was happening. Is the baby? So yeah, the screaming was happening. I mean, it was like you needed to do that to get him out, I felt like. Maybe that's not the case if I had stayed focused. Again, I don't really know. But it was, my water broke at like 8:35, or maybe even less. I don't know. My timeline's a little skewed. So maybe they came in and checked me. It was about 8:15 they checked me. Then I walked, came to pee, water broke at 8:30ish, and then I had the baby at 8:41. So it was super quick, even though I felt like I was on the table forever, pushing forever, like he wasn't going to come out. So it happened, and he finally, after 4 or 5 pushes, like real pushes, he came out, and it was a miracle. He was there. They put him up on my chest. We did skin to skin. My husband was there. He was really proud of me for being able to do it naturally. I was like, I can't believe I just did it. I didn't like, so this might be too much information. So if you're not really into like the details of what happens down yonder, then you might want to turn off the video. But I didn't tear, where you usually tear, like where the baby actually comes out. Actually, my labia tore, which is a lot higher up in the vagina. I don't know why it tore, but it did. But as of now, I haven't had my 6-week postpartum checkup, but it's turned out to be it's better than actually having a tear down there, because, it's hard to sit when you have those kinds of tears. And my dog just walked in the room. Hi, Aladdin. And so it was nice having a tear a little higher up, and it was apparently a pretty small tear. Again, I don't know. This is just what the nurse told me at the hospital. So when I go to my 6-week postpartum checkup, I will ask my midwife about it a little more. But yeah, it's all in all been not so bad. It gets sore every now and then, but other than that, not bad. He was able to latch on almost immediately. He was a great breastfeeder. For the first 24 hours after I had him, he only fed once though, so that was different from what Sarah did. He fed immediately, like an hour after I gave birth, and then nothing. But they say because I had him so quickly that he came out through the birth canal so fast that they inhale a lot of amniotic fluid, and so they're kind of like full feeling for a while until they can get rid of all that. So it took him about 24 hours to get rid of all that. But he's been a great feeder since. His latch was a little wonky, but we've worked through that. He was born at 8 pounds 4 ounces, 8 pounds 3.9 ounces, 21 inches long, which at his 2-week checkup, they measured him and he was like 20.5. So there was a mismeasurement either at the hospital when he was born or at the doctor's office, but 21 inches, and he had a big head, 14-inch circumference head. His sister was 13 and a half. He was like 14.4, I think. So they both have huge heads, and their heads do not mold when they come out. They stay round, okay? Just really sweet. It was, the pushing part for me was a little I don't know the right word, but it was scary. It was hard. I was really fearful, like I said. And so after I had him, I was really exhausted just from that. And also I'd been in labor all day, so I was really tired. So I was having kind of like a hard time being like overly emotional and enthusiastic about him being there. It took a while for me to like kind of overcome the birth process and like be excited about him being in my arms finally. It was sort of like a lot, but it was also an incredible experience, and it was just a lot to process, I guess, and I was processing really slowly because I was so tired. And but he was amazing. The first hour or two, he cried like the whole time, and I was doing skin to skin, and I couldn't really move because they were like stitching me up and, you know, all the stuff. And so I was like trying to get him comfortable and trying to get me comfortable, and so that was hard, and I was tired. But he finally, after about 2 hours, and you know, he had a big meal, ate for like an hour, he calmed down and went to sleep, and then slept a lot, and it was good. The only weird thing postpartum was that I'd gotten really big with him. I'll have to show a picture, but I was really big with him, and after I had him, the weight of my uterus and like my organs that had been moved around that are now falling back into place was a lot to kind of handle when I was on my feet. It felt really heavy, and I don't remember feeling that with Sarah at all. Maybe because I had an epidural and I didn't have any feeling from like a certain point down. But that was alarming for me. Like when I would stand up, it would just be really heavy feeling to the point of where it felt hard to breathe. But after about 24 hours, that completely, like, didn't go away completely, but it got a lot better within 24 hours. And by 48 hours, by the time we were like leaving the hospital, it was almost completely gone. And by 72 hours, it was completely gone. So that was just something that I guess it was just my organs resituating themselves, that, like I said, the weight of my huge uterus and my stomach, all that extra flab was just a lot for me to, there was like no baby support there. It was just dangling. I know it's gross. It was though. It got better. It's getting a lot better. I've lost a lot more weight this time postpartum. The bleeding was not nearly as bad. I am still bleeding, and I am almost 6 weeks postpartum, but it's a really light, like not like panty liner, like nothing big deal. Some days, like a couple of days in a row, I'll go without even noticing anything. The vaginal healing, like I said, it was a different tear than my first one. My first had a 2nd-degree tear. And so since this tear was in a different spot and a lot smaller, it was a lot easier to deal with. It was just amazing. It was a really amazing birth. I think I'm still processing it. I don't feel like I did it naturally. But the healing seemed, like I said, quicker, physically quicker. The being so tired, I feel like I haven't really overcome that as quickly as I did it with my first, but that's probably because I don't get to sleep every time he sleeps like I did with her, because I have her to take care of. So I really only get like a 2-hour window during the day where they're both sleeping, and you know, like an 1.5-hour window at night before I go to bed, and then he still wakes up about every 3 hours at night, and so it's just tiring. It's hard to get over that, on top of breastfeeding and then taking care of a toddler and all the things. It's just taking me a little longer to get my energy back, but it's coming back. I have good days. Today's kind of, I'm tired today. Probably after this, as long as the kids let me, I'm going to try and take like a 45-minute nap. It's been really hard adjusting to 2. I can do a whole separate video on that. But I am in a unique situation where my husband is home with me on maternity leave, so I couldn't imagine doing it by myself. He's been a huge help. But now I feel like at 6 weeks, we're finally starting to get the hang of it. We also had a lot of visitors after we had Hunter. His name was Hunter. And that made it difficult. You know, it was like we had like a 2-week period between when we had Hunter and when our first set of visitors arrived. My mother-in-law stayed like 4 days after we had, or I guess she stayed about 5 days after we had him. And then when she left, I was in the hospital, so we had him Sunday night at 8:41. I was in the hospital until Tuesday morning, like lunchtime. And she stayed till Friday. And then we had like a 2-week period. And then we had family come. And so the first round of family was David's dad and his brother. And then after that, it was my parents. And then after that, it was his sister. And then after that, it is his aunt and uncle. And they're coming in tonight. They're not staying at our house, but everybody else has been staying at our house. It's been great having them here, but it's been hard. You know, you think it's going to make things easier, but it makes it a little more difficult just because you got to have the house clean and cook and, you know, entertain. And even if you don't have to, you have, like when they're like, hey, we're coming out to stay with you, don't worry about us, you'll be fine. And don't do anything, we'll take care of it all. But you still can't, you have to do stuff. Like, I'm not the type of person who's going to leave my house a mess when I have visitors, you know? So, it's been hard. But now that the company has kind of slowed down a little bit and things are starting to get back to normal, we're kind of getting into our routine and our schedule. It's becoming easier. It's not so intimidating when you have to think about taking care of 2 kids by yourself. It's not as bad. I don't mind doing it now. We actually had our first outing this week. Went to a church function, and I took both the kids by myself, and it was a lot of fun. It was easy though, because once I got there was childcare for Sarah, my oldest, so yeah, it was easy. But we're getting there, and it's fun, and I feel very blessed to be able to have these 2 beautiful kids, and they are both gorgeous and really sweet and really well behaved. Sarah's been the best big sister. She loves him to death. She has her moments, you know. I don't know if it's her being almost 2 or if it's because she's got a new baby brother, or if it's a mix of things, but like 98% of the time she's great. The last couple of days she's been a little but I think she might have a cold or something, a little emotional, but she still just loves Hunter. I mean, the emotional part comes, it's not towards him at all. It's just like towards us. So we're slowly figuring it out, and it's good. And I really do feel like I had a supernatural childbirth. And I really highly recommend, if you're pregnant or trying to conceive, getting that book, Supernatural Childbirth by Jackie Mize. Highly recommend it. And yeah, I guess that's it. I'll do another video on Hunter's 6-week postpartum update. Was going to do a month, but didn't. Like I said, this is my first YouTube video, so I hope you guys subscribe and start following me, and leave a comment below on what you liked and didn't like about the video and how I can start making the videos better going forward. I probably rambled too much, so I apologize. Yeah, let me know. So I'll do a video on his 6-week update. I can do a video on my 6-week postpartum update and go into a little more detail if you guys are interested. Let me know if you're interested in that. And then there was one other one I wanted to do. I don't know. Stay tuned. You will see. But yeah, thanks for watching. Give me a thumbs up, and come back and watch some more videos. I'll keep you up to date on all the things. I know a lot I've been through. I know I've only been through it twice, but when it comes to having babies, trying to conceive, being pregnant, the labor and delivery, raising an infant from infant to 2, I've got a good bit of knowledge on it, and I'm learning along with you guys, and we can feed off each other and just kind of create a positive environment where women can come together and sort of learn from one another, encourage one another, and you know, there's a lot I can learn from you guys. So let me know, keep me posted on what you like and don't like about my videos, so I can keep them interesting, and we'll go from there. Alright guys, thanks.